regardless of what stain you're using, oil-based, water-based, whatever, you're inhaling fumes. And their helpers usually won't because they think,
well, I'm not right in front of the sprayer. I'm not getting as much of that in my area, in my breathing space.
But again, better safe than sorry. I don't know that I've ever seen lumber at 0%. Even when we're going back years later and restaining a fence, typically it has some moisture. 2 rails on a 6-foot fence is a whole different reaction video, but always have 3 rails on a 6-foot fence.
Today's video is brought to you by our good friends over at Nationwide Industries, the Fence Pros' #1 choice. And they are this Fence Pros' #1 choice for a couple reasons. One, we love using their Keystone Traverse latches. They're easy to install. You simply bolt them onto the post. No drilling for rods or cutting the rods required. It's a pretty straightforward installation process. We also love using their full line of galvanized hardware. It shows up quickly and reliably. All right, guys, today's video is titled Staining a Fence, Expert Stain and Seal by the Paint Life TV. If you watch the channel at all, you know we love the Expert Stain and Seal products, or Expert Professional Wood Care products now, line of fence stain. You saw us do a video recently showing a different fence stain, so we thought we'd check in with the Paint Life TV and see what he likes about the Expert Stain and Seal product. Let's go.
All right, we're out here getting ready to do a fence today. We're gonna be oiling it with Expert Stain and Seal, self-leveling, non-drying oil. Before doing any type of fence, deck, pergola, anything that's raw wood, make sure you test the moisture content. If you don't test the moisture content, you're gonna have problems with the application down the road. The wood's not gonna soak up the oil.
It's interesting, you can see on this picket fence, so I mean, it's hard to tell what species of wood this is. It might have been stained before, or it might be some of the pre-treated or pressure-treated pine is also stained at the same time. Anyway, it's unnaturally brown. I think you said it's about a year old. So you can also see where they probably have irrigation, something is spraying on this fence consistently and prematurely lightened it up.
It should. There's going to be adhesion and penetration problems down the road also. So I use a device, Ryobi moisture meter right here. It's Bluetooth. I can select the species of wood I'm going to be testing. It's got 2 prongs.
That's interesting. So we use just a handheld, just because we're putting crews into the field. If it were one person, we could train them on their phone. But these things are probably $20, $30 on Amazon. They're pronged like that. They don't Bluetooth in with anything. They just have a readout on them. And if they ever go bad, you toss them out and get another one.
Oh, I forgot. You're broken. I don't want to play with you anymore.
Simple and easy to use. I'm just gonna press it right into the wood. I'm gonna wait 5 or 10 seconds and it's gonna give me a reading.
I don't know that I've ever seen lumber at 0%. Even when we're going back years later and restaining a fence, typically it has some moisture, especially, I mean, just looking at the shadows, I would guess it's in the morning time, wherever this is done at. So usually you have like a dew overnight or something overnight to where it's somewhere in the 10, 15, 20% ballpark. I don't know that I've ever seen it 0%. If you guys stain fence professionally, let me know in the comments below. Have you ever seen wood at 0% after a year of being installed?
Really what you're looking for is 16% or below. I think it's really ideal if it's gonna be 13% or below. I'm looking for 11% or below. So right here at 0.
It's a lot of numbers to throw at you. I think the manufacturer's suggestion is 13. We feel good with anything under 15. Now, one thing that's important to note, so he tested one space or one spot. Now, I would say off camera, he's probably tested throughout the fence. Depending on how long the fence is, how much of it there is to stain, typically we would pick 4 or 5 different spots. The face of the picket, definitely a good idea. We would probably go around the fence, check under the rails. Thank you, Kenny Dugan, for that tip. Check the inside, kind of see where the shadows are, check those, make sure, hey, maybe the face of it's dried out because the sun's on it. Let's check the shadow side or the shaded side, see where it's at. You'd want to pick 4, 5, 6 places, take the average. But now if one particular place was like 20%, you would want to leave it alone for a while, maybe start on a different part. But it's always important, take 4, 5, 6 readings, depending on how much of it you have to stain. So one thing to note too, so he said the fence has been up for a while. He had pine selected on wood species, so his treated pine, looks like it was a pre-stained treated pine. Looks fairly sharp. You can also tell it's a treated pine just by how those boards are bowing in and out. Depending on who you talk to, there's different rules of thumb. Some will say 6 months, 8 months. Some will say you got to wait a year. Ultimately, what he's doing by checking the moisture is the correct way, right? So, if he's in Idaho, I believe, but if you're like in Texas, Arizona, where it's dry and hot, you could put that fence up or have the fence put up and possibly be ready to stain it in a couple months, just with the sun baking in a really low humidity environment. You would want to just test the humidity or test the moisture content of the lumber. It could be sooner. Or if you're in a really damp, humid spot, it might be more than a year for that treated pine to cure out enough to where it's going to accept that stain. The key point here is always check the moisture content.
Make sure you test your wood, whether you're doing a deck, fence, pergola, anything wood, before treating it with Expert Stain and Seal self-leveling non-drying oil.
It really goes for any stain. This is a sponsored video, I'm betting, but regardless of what you're staining it with, you always want to check that moisture content. Let's see what color he's going with. Something pretty dark. Black? Black's one of those colors. It will cover everything. So one tip, we'll talk about it here when we get to looking at the fence again. So one thing, and you don't necessarily see it as much here. I guess you can see it on the part of the pickets below that lower rail, which 2 rails on a 6-foot fence is a whole different reaction video, but always have 3 rails on a 6-foot fence. The darker the color, the more it will cover and the more it will consistently cover. So again, the part of the picket below that bottom rail is lighter than the rest of it. So again, probably sprinklers, irrigation or something. If you'll remember in the beginning of the video, it looked like there's a pretty nice arc, which is common. If you're driving down the road, a lot of the fences you see have what looks like arches all down the fence from where the sprinkler systems hit. If you put a really light stain, you would likely still see those arches. He's going in with a black stain, or what it's either black or really dark, could be a walnut maybe. It's going to cover this really nicely. Also, the 2x4s are obviously a very different color. So again, going in with a dark color is more likely to consistently cover this, make it look all one color.
Ready to second day oil a fence. So we're working on staining the fence black. We're using Stain and Seal Experts penetrating oil on this stain on this fence. I'm going to give you some tips and tricks applying this product and actually prepping and getting ready to spray the product.
As a fence guy, we're going to talk about the fence too. I know this is a stain reaction video, but dome caps for these posts, maybe $1.50.
$1.50?
$1.50.
Per post. You definitely want to put a dome cap on there. Maybe they're in an area that doesn't freeze. Well, he's in Idaho, I believe, so it definitely freezes. Water gets in there. Over time, it fills, freezes, and it cracks the post. Splits the post below grade, and then you got to worry about rusting, that sort of thing. For $1.50, it's pretty cheap insurance.
So we're going to be using cardboard shields to cover the grass. We're going to be using hand masker, plastic masker, paper masker to mask off, things we don't want to get the oil on. Always wear.
Now that's a pro tip. That hand masker, after this video is over, I think we'll be looking into those. That would make it very nice to mask like around where the fence meets the house, that sort of thing.
For a mask, when I'm spraying oils, I like to wear a suit. That way I don't get any of the oil on me. At the end of the day, I can just rip the suit off, throw it away.
Mask is also definitely important. I mean, you talk to guys that have stained for years, decades, and they'll tell you how important it is to wear respirators because they're going through some respiration problems, regardless of what stain you're using. Oil-based, water-based, whatever. you're inhaling fumes, and it always tends to lead to respiratory problems.
And I don't have any of that messy oil on me, on my clothes, or on my skin. I'm gonna be using an extension pole with a back brush to be back brushing the stain. This is a penetrating oil. It's a self-leveling oil. So on a vertical surface, it means it's going to penetrate the surface. If you have runs, drips, and stuff like that, it's gonna self-level on a vertical surface, and you're not gonna see any of that.
So if you guys watched a recent reaction, I believe it's SWI's video we reacted to, they're showing an oil-based sealant from, I believe it was Wood Defender, talking about self-leveling and that sort of thing. I think it's important to note there are multiple oil-based stains out there that are self-leveling. It's not really like a proprietary thing. A lot of the products do. Oil-based penetrating sealants will have that property, the self-leveling. It's interesting that he's going back and back brushing it. One of the benefits of flood coating is you typically don't need to go back and back brush. Now, there's not a downside to it. So if it gives you extra peace of mind to make sure every nook and cranny is stained, it's not a bad idea.
That. Now, Stain and Seal, Expert Stain and Seal is a product that does not have to be back brushed, and that's the self-leveling properties makes it so you can just spray it on, not back brush at all. Now, I do typically always back brush when I'm doing any type of wood surfaces, bare wood, you know, to promote adhesion and penetration. I wanted to get in there really deep into the wood, and back brushing just aids in that process. That's one of the great things about Stain and Seal, Expert Stain and Seal, is you don't have to, but I still just do it anyway. Another thing is masking. A lot of products, solid color stains, drying oils, you're gonna have to mask all this hardware off if you don't want to get the stain on it. Expert Stain and Seal, the oil is a non-drying oil, so I can come back the next day or same day, just a rag. I could wipe all these pulls off. It's gonna make it really simple and easy. The gate hardware, any type of hardware, you don't have to mask any of that off. It's gonna save you a ton of time.
Typically, if it's a two-person crew staining, the second person is mixing stain up, making sure everything's, maybe if we're close to a house, making sure it's rinsed down or at least moist. But then also just has a box of rags going behind whoever's staining. One, cleaning up the post and hardware. Two, pointing out. Sometimes, I mean, it's human. We're human. Sometimes we miss a spot. Under a rail is usually where you see that. So they're also kind of closely inspecting that. It can be done. You can clean those up right after is usually the best time. But to his point, you could come back a day later and it still would be able to get cleaned up. You might need a little bit of degreaser depending on what's stained.
We do want to mask areas like parts of the fence we don't want to get, you know, stain on, or a house, a porous surface that, you know, could absorb the stain in and we wouldn't be able to wipe it off. So, you know, make sure you mask and prep properly. So I'm going to get ready, start applying cardboard shields. We use the cardboard shields just to tuck underneath the fence because we don't want to get, you know, or just limit overspray, you know, on the grass, on the ground, stuff like that. I'm using an airless sprayer to apply the product. Now you can use, I know guys that use up to, you know, 12, 21 tips to just blast these fences super fast. I like to use a really small tip because I like to control overspray. There's no wind out today, but you can still go extremely fast. I like to use just a 515 tip. It's going to put on a lot of product. It's going to give product that you can back brush while you're applying it, but it's really going to help you control.
So what he's talking about, 515, the first two numbers talk about orifice size, so the size of the hole that the stain's coming out of. Larger number, larger hole, more stain comes out. The second set of numbers is how wide that pattern is. So what he's saying is there's a lot of guys that will use a really large orifice and a really wide fan, just putting out tons of product. But the trade-off there is you have less control of it, to his point, but also you're more likely to spray stain where you don't want it. There's a trade-off. Speed versus accuracy.
Overspray. I turn the pressure down on my pump all the way down to you know, right around 500-600 psi. I don't have a gauge on my pump today that tells me exactly, but I'm got it down to the bare minimum pressure, and that's just gonna keep the product from, you know, being pushed out into the air, which it'll eventually carry in the air because it is an oil and it's really light. So I'm gonna start getting ready to spray. We're doing both sides of this fence. I'm gonna be controlling overspray, going on the backside using a cardboard shield right here that will limit, the spray from carrying from the back.
That's a great tip as well, using a back shield. So you see guys accomplish this in different ways. I like the fact that in his setup, the person actually applying the stain is controlling that backboard, or you can call it different things, but he's controlling the backboard. That way it's moving with him. I've seen other people take, like a 4x8 sheet of styrofoam insulation or just foam insulation, cutting it in half to where it's just a few feet tall, using that. But usually that's a second helper behind running that along with whoever's staining. I like this a little bit better that way. Whoever's staining can put that exactly where they want it.
Side now, I typically spray at an angle so I don't get overspray shooting directly through the fence this direction right here. So I'll be spraying at an angle so I'm hitting the sides of the picket but limiting overspray going through the fence. So it's going to look a little bit like this.
So it's interesting to see the nozzle, the sprayer, is even with the top. Now, when we watched the SWI video, they actually used a sprayer that was spraying from the top down to make sure they got the top of the pickets. I'd be curious to see how he ensures that the top of every picket's coated. Coats really well. I also like the fact that his helper is wearing a respirator. Sometimes even the guys that wear respirators as they're spraying, their helpers usually won't because they think,
well, I'm not right in front of the sprayer. I'm not getting as much of that in my area, in my breathing space.
But again, better safe than sorry. So it's interesting to see him. I mean, he's not so much flood coating. Now, obviously, he has sprayed a ton of either paint or stain, both, right, as a professional painter. So he likely knows just the moment of it's getting ready to run. The previous video, we saw stain running down the fence to make sure that it was a flood coat, that everything that could get coated was coated, and so there's excess stain on the board for it to soak up. Maybe the thought here is since they're pressure treated, maybe they're not going to soak up as much. If you're doing this for the first time or newer doing this, I would still like to see this get flood coated just to make sure every square inch is coated and the boards have the opportunity to soak up as much stain as they can. Now, in the beginning of the video, we're operating under the assumption that this is a 0% moisture content, which means these boards should soak up this stain like a sponge.
All right, now, I've got this side of the fence done. I can actually, start, wiping down my posts, but now I just realized got the other side of the fence to do. Overspray might come in through these pickets and get on this, so I don't want to get ahead of myself and start wiping this stuff down. I'll wipe it down when I do the opposite side. We're going to switch cardboards over, move to the other side. I don't have to worry about this drying once again because it is a non-drying oil, so we can just leave it on there. I can leave it on there to the end of the day. I can come back even tomorrow, finish it up and wipe it off. So
notice again, so we're talking about that the rails were noticeably lighter than the pickets. This stain does a great job because it is darker, it's black. Because it's using black, there's a lot more pigment, it's a darker pigment. The rails now match the pickets, which ultimately I think is a better look.
We're gonna move over. We've got the other side of the fence that we're masking off, and we'll shoot the other side. Go take a look at that.
All right, guys, let me know what you think of the fence. I think the black color was a correct choice for this fence just because you had different colors we were trying to blend in. Altogether, I think it turned out great. Again, let me know what you think in the comments below. For now, Joe Everest, the fence expert, reminding you that good fences make good neighbors, and I'll see you next time.